Oh, you beat up my Wales today, Dan. I am Welsh. A portion of my lineage is Welsh.
It's okay, there's support groups for that.
Hello there, FC Dallas Curious fan. Welcome to another episode of Third Degree, the podcast. Hi, I'm Peter, and as always, well, normally, I've got my two buddies with me. First, the good Dan Crooke with an E. Hello, Daniel.
Hey, I'm back. Wow.
You're back. Excellent. Very good. I didn't get to ask you last week, did you survive your birthday gift of losing to Watford?
Yeah, I was fine with that. I watched the last minute of injury time and went, sod it, I don't really care. I've been drinking.
All right. Very good. Well, happy birthday. How old now? 67?
Almost 34.
All right. Excellent. And, of course, your hero and mine, the good Buzz Carrick. Come in, Buzz.
Hello, Peter, calling in today from Gulfport, Mississippi. Thought I'd go dance in a hurricane waters.
Oh, okay. Well, have fun. Good luck with all that. All right. So we are recording this on Thursday evening on the heels of a particularly ugly loss that I'm sure we're going to get to here in a little bit. So in lieu of that, I'm going to ask you, one of you, to step up to the microphone and give us something positive to think about when it comes to Football Club Dallas, just so we can kick the pod off in a positive note.
Dan, you got anything?
I don't know. Have you got anything?
Is
there anything?
Well,
I can do something positive if you want.
Well, go ahead.
Well, despite the relatively poor results, Dallas still has a pretty good defense. And if you have a pretty good defense, then you can build on that. You only have 17 goals allowed, which is the second fewest in the Western Conference. So you can build from that. So that's the positive.
Well, and I guess we'll talk more about this when we talk about the Houston game. Did we get any reports back on the extent of Matt's, appears to be a hamstring injury, and how long we expect him to be out? Because I have a feeling that vaunted defense you're speaking of will get tested if he's out for a while.
No, we do not. They have not done the bi-weekly media call yet in preparation for the next game, so we do not have that answer yet.
Should be tomorrow, though.
Hopefully.
Okay. So that's it. That's the most positive thing we can come up with.
Hey, I've got a positive.
Yeah.
FC Dallas was not the first club this season to accidentally sub on a player at halftime who was not on the game day roster, have to watch the referee piss around on an iPhone for 10 minutes looking at the roster, and then he gets told to go sod off to the locker room.
Wait, what are you talking about?
Oh, you didn't see Russell Knels get subbed on for DC?
I'm familiar with that, but when did that happen to FC Dallas?
That's what I'm saying. It didn't.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
That's why it's positive.
Oh, I thought you were saying they weren't the first to do it. I'm sorry, I misunderstood you, Dan. Yes, they did not accidentally try to sub in a guy that wasn't on the 18.
Yeah, I'm not saying it won't happen. That's why I'm like, they're just not the first.
That was 2 years ago in Orlando.
But that was different. The referee signed that change off.
Yeah. The man told them they could do it.
The man made the change for him.
Yeah, so, man, this is weird because Dallas now is winless in their last 4. They are 0-2-2. And, two of those losses come against two of the lesser teams in the league that were coming into the game on 6-game winless streaks, and then the other two were both at home against two of the better teams in the Eastern Conference, but came into the game, 1, having to travel, and 2, not at full strength. And I just, we're going to start talking about the Columbus game first, but overall, Buzz, let's just get your overall sense as to where this team sits in this moment, considering what's happened over the last 2 weeks.
Well, in their favor, not a lot of people in the bottom of the Western Conference are winning games, so they're still in the playoff picture. So that's nice, I guess. The real worry, of course, is that they've been shut out in 3 of the last 4, which, of course, directly leads to the record that you just mentioned and their inability to win games. You have to go back to other than the Columbus game where they had 2 goals, really you have to go back to the Sporting Kansas City game that they won 3-2, and before that, the Colorado game when they had Santi's hat trick. And I imagine this is probably what Luchi is doing too, is you'll have to go back to those games and look at what you did and try and see if you can figure out how to get that to happen again, and I have a couple of suspicions, but we'll see what Luchi does with that.
Okay, so you point out, yeah, I think that's the weird part about all of this is that, Dallas is not that different from so many other teams in the league, and it's hard to get too excited or too upset about your club status because there's not a lot of teams that are going on extended winning streaks of any sort. I'm sitting here looking at the league form table on the website, and there's lots of yellows and reds and greens all kind of intermixed, but I didn't realize this. So do we collectively feel like, or do you think the general fan feels like Dallas is a significantly better team than Houston or had more success than Houston since the restart?
Well, I certainly would have thought that. I considered Houston a place that you can go and get some points. I don't know if people would have thought, Dallas is such an afterthought in the minds of most people, most fans in this league. So even though that they're relatively good, they're not great ever, but they're relatively good most of the time. People still think of them as a not great team.
Right.
So probably not. Probably considered, even some among Dallas fans who don't recognize the fact that their team is usually pretty good, probably haven't recognized the fact that Houston has been terrible the last 6 games or so.
Yeah. Well, the thing I didn't realize is that Dallas and Houston, by and large, have an almost identical record since the restart. And, they each have 4 wins. They each have an almost equal number of. Actually, Houston has lost fewer games, I believe, than. No, they each have 3 losses, and the rest of them are draws. So it's a weird feeling to think that Dallas isn't really, record-wise, any significantly better than a Houston team that has lost a lot of players and sold off its best striker and also dealing with a brand new coach. So I set that conversation aside a little bit more for when we talk about Houston, but as we move into the conversation about Columbus and coming on to a second game in a row at home against an East Coast leader, that game ends up 2-2, and it was certainly not a game that you came away from feeling too great about the situation. 1, because of the number of players Columbus was missing, and 2, kind of the missed opportunities and the fact that you gave up the lead twice over the course of 90 minutes.
Yeah, I didn't feel too bad about that game because Columbus is one of the best teams in the league. Both that game and the Orlando game, I did feel like they were there. You could have had them, but I feel like those are 2 of the best teams in the league, and so it was a pretty positive feeling I was having. It's only when you put it in the context of the Atlanta game before that and then this game since then that you really start to feel like the streak has not been good the last 4.
Yeah, definitely after the Columbus game, you kind of come away with it. One of the top teams, the only player they were missing was Darlington Nagbe.
That's a pretty significant piece to their puzzle, though.
But that's only one piece. They killed FC Dallas on the counter-attack. There's not many teams that are going to do that. So, you can kind of say, all right, well, you saw some positives, you saw some negatives that very few teams are going to be able to exploit.
So one of the things that was interesting about the Columbus game is it represented the first time Luchi has made a tactical decision of pushing Acosta higher and pulling Ricarte back a little bit. And I've seen different people. I've heard Steve Davis describe Ricarte as playing more as a double pivot 6 with Acosta in front. I've seen a 6 and 8 and a 10 or a 6 and 2 8s. Buzz, help me sort out what Luchi's trying to do by pushing Acosta up and Ricarte back.
Well, the general idea, and of course we've talked about the way the triangle in the midfield rotates all the time. Luchi is pretty non-rigid when it comes to formations, and as long as you take care of your responsibility, it's usually all right. So the general idea was to have according to Luchi now, the general idea was to have Acosta be a little higher and do a little more of the pressing. I think in an effort to try and free up Ricarte a little bit from some of that responsibility and have Acosta be a little more of a chaser. Because you have a couple guys that can spell Acosta and you don't really have a guy that can spell Ricarte per se, So I think that was the general concept. And I think that's the idea of having two guys that can both release and come back. It is a good thing to have in the sense that the defense doesn't know who's coming. And Ricarte plays enough defense that it can work. He even shifted back and line up kind of like a 6 for a little while. So it's a fluid midfield, and that's okay.
So do you feel like it's working? And you can kind of throw in the Houston game in here too if you want to. Do you feel like he's getting out of it what he is hoping to get?
I think sometimes he does and sometimes he doesn't. We've seen such inconsistency right now with the midfield between Acosta being sometimes good and sometimes bad, and Thiago Santos when he's feeling good and feeling rested looks good, but when he's tired like this game we just had, he looks against Houston, he looks absolutely horrible and gets subbed at halftime. When you have so much inconsistency like that, it's hard to really feel like, I would imagine as a coach, that you're really getting what you're looking for. I do think that the more of a double 8 look with Ricarte and Acosta works. I like that. I think Luchi likes that. The problem is it leaves Thiago Santos on an island, and he's not quite mobile enough to play, for example, sideline to sideline, which is an important part of covering up outside backs when needed in this formation, because your wings they basically both stay high. So I think it's definitely a work in progress still. I think Luchi will not be satisfied, and I'm sure that's why at halftime he made the change.
One of my notes from that particular game, and it kind of feeds in a little bit into the Houston game as well, and is kind of a growing theme, which is Franco Jara has been paid a lot of money to come here and do one thing and one thing only, and that's score goals. And in the Columbus game in particular, there were 2 or maybe even 3 what I would think are probably very high XG type opportunities that he just absolutely did not finish. One in particular I was thinking was I think a Brian Reynolds cross against on the ground across the face of goal that he didn't seem to have any desire to sacrifice his body to throw a leg out to kind of knock it in, and just other things. And that's one weird little thing about Franco Jara that's starting to nag at me personally as a fan and watching the game. Is anybody else picking up on this too?
My general thinking on him is mostly that he's not getting enough touches. And he is definitely limited in his mobility. We've talked about the fact that he's flat out slow. So, he does play as a false 9. And that means it's hard for him because he is slow, it's hard for him to get to those balls that are a little bit of a lead pass, which is in some ways not good for this team because of the fact they have so many guys that want to cross the ball. Reynolds and Barrios usually on the right, but not always. And then Hollingshead and Pico are both a little more of a cut inside guy, but they still play a lot of balls in too. And even guys like Reto and Ricarte want to play balls into the box. So I wouldn't mind to see an adjustment on his end of being a little more like push a high line kind of striker, because then I think he would get more of those opportunities. I just think that given how old he is, and how limited his mobility is, that this is pretty much what we're going to get. We're going to get kind of hot and cold performances from him. He does put in work rate. I'll give him that, but
he's an older player. It's kind of what you get, right? You don't get the 20-year-old that's throwing themselves around like you'll see. One of the chances Pepe had yesterday, I think the only chance Pepe had yesterday was really trying to launch himself at the ball with Wile E. Coyote's Acme catapult. Unfortunately, a 34-year-old just isn't going to do that because they know they're probably going to end up missing the next 5 games.
Yeah, I'm speaking more specifically to opportunities that you would think a guy getting paid $1 million a year is going to convert more of than less of, and I just get the sense that we're not there with him yet. Headed opportunities. He's not a guy that takes on defenders a lot. He's more of an opportunistic striker. He's not a guy that creates a lot of space for himself. And it's interesting to have people come in the team and kind of learn their pros and cons. And Buzz, this is obviously a big aspect of the fact that you don't get to go watch training, right? Like you don't get to learn a lot about these guys and what they do during training. So we're all kind of learning in real time what Franco Jara's strengths and weaknesses are. And again, without trying to get too much into the Houston game, there was the big difference to me between the two games is that I think he just tired and he just didn't look interested in the Houston game, where he was very active in the Columbus game, just really missed a couple of really solid opportunities that you would have liked to have seen him finish.
Well, I would agree with you that you're not getting as clinical a player as I had hoped for. I agree with you that like I kind of wanted to see a guy that was more of a pure finisher than we're getting. I do wonder if that's the kind of thing that over time, as his teammates learned him, you would get the ball to him in better positions for him. When you learn where the guy wants it and that kind of thing. I just don't want to be too hard on the guy who's only been here for like 6 or 7 games in the middle of the most chaotic year of all time. I mean, maybe I'm supposed to be hard on him, but some guys take 6 months or a year to get into the game. And this guy's been here for a month or whatever. So I'm not too worried about it, but I agree with you that so far it's not good enough.
Yeah, my only comment there is he's 32, almost 33. He doesn't have 6 months or a year.
It's the problem with signing a 32-year-old striker.
Yeah. Interesting. Now, the other thing that's happened in both the Columbus and Houston game, and I think we're just going to end up mixing the two together because there's aspects to each game that are kind of consistent, which is this thing that we've talked about numerous times on this podcast. Every manager has their favorite player, a guy that they just, for whatever reason, even if the fan base and other people look at it and go, what the hell is going on? And for Luchi, that's clearly Jesus Ferreira. And I don't understand why he has now subbed Ricarte out at 60 minutes in 2 games in a row and thrown on Ferreira, who has... And now in the course of 60 minutes between 2 games, done absolutely nothing and shown zero.
Yeah, I think when he came on for this one, the idea was that up a man, he would be able to like exploit some of those gaps that last year we thought he was really good at. But he didn't do that. He spent like most of the time, because they eventually took off Reto. There was only one center back. And he and Tessman ended up playing like double 6 in front of a single center back. So like the reason you would have brought Jesus on, he wasn't doing that. And look, coaches have favorite players and they have guys they trust and they have guys they're going to go to. And that's clearly, Luchi's guy and Jesus. He doesn't have a whole lot of bench options with much experience, frankly. Pepe is still very young and inexperienced. Roberts hardly ever plays. Dante Seeley's 16, so he doesn't have a lot of choices, to be honest. Once Tessman was already in, Brandon Cervini's not an offensive player, so he's limited, frankly.
Yeah, what's interesting to me, though, between the 2 games is the difference in the fact that Dallas, Luchi seemed to have has seemingly struggled in terms of substitutions, or he's done similar substitutions for very different game scenarios. In the Columbus game, he's got a lead, right? He's up 2-1 and can't seem to manage the team to keep them in the lead. And in the other game, he's up a man and trying to fight back to score goals, and he can't seem to sort a solution to that either. And that really that's the reason why the Ferreira substitution in both games is puzzling to me, especially when Ricarte in particular is a guy who is clearly the singular person that was retaining possession and kind of creating for the team.
Against Houston? Or against...
in both games, frankly.
Yeah. Well, Ricarte went 90 against Houston. It was Acosta that came off.
That's right. I'm sorry. That's right. He
Yeah.
substituted Acosta off in the Houston game.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Ricarte had 118 touches against Houston and 6 key passes. I mean, the guy was just crushing it. And to be honest, Brian Acosta had 5 key passes, so he was doing pretty well too. I don't think I would have taken off either one of those guys the way they were playing. They were both tearing apart Houston. That's why it was so odd to me. The Jesus sub was so odd to me in the Houston game. In the Columbus game, I kind of understood it because you're trying to still keep Ricarte on a relative minute restriction, in the sense that you can't. He's still building towards 90 minutes, and there's such a heavy load. You can't play him 90 minutes every single game. And Jesus, should have some of the abilities that make him good at killing a game. He should be able to combine. He should be able to possess. So that game, I kind of understood it. The Houston game, I found it baffling. Again, it just comes down to Luchi's faith.
I think, the part that got me is when I was writing notes watching the Houston game earlier today, I definitely wrote, why is Jesus on the field several times. I think he comes on 2 minutes in, there's that header from Haro, there was a back header, and the keeper just parries it out to Jesus. Really nice, easy first time header. Instead, he watches the ball go up and then come down and then go up and then get cleared by a defender.
I actually think that Luchi's doing Jesus a disservice because he is bringing him in at so many different positions and asking him to do so many different things. The kid can't get a groove going in terms of what is my job, what position am I playing, and what am I best at? Can I please work on that? Rather than just being like the stopgap glue that I stick in, round square peg in a round hole because I don't have any other bodies left.
Yeah,
Definitely.
and I'm sorry. Go ahead, Dan.
I was going to say I definitely agree with that, but I mean he missed 2 sitters in 2 minutes. It's that shouldn't factor into that at all. He's getting in the right areas and then just disappearing when it matters. It's what everyone used to hate about Christian Coleman.
Well, and also to add to that, the one clear opportunity where he had the chance to volley it in and tie the game was a miss that, I don't think any of us thought Jesus would miss back when the guy had a lot of confidence. I mean, Steve Davis was very clear. He's like, back in the day, I would tell you all day and all night, he's the best natural finisher on this team. And he just absolutely butchered that chance. And he just looks like a kid with zero confidence running through his veins. And I can't tell if Luchi's trying to re-inject that in him or if Luchi just sees him differently than the rest of us do.
This twice he's missed that shot actually recently when the ball's coming across his body and he sweeps it with his right foot rather than letting it come across and hit it with his left. I don't know how good his left foot is, but he definitely has missed it twice in the last, week and a half. I can't remember the other game he did it, but it was maybe in Atlanta. It was very recently.
All right, so let's. So with the adjustment of pushing Acosta into more of an advanced position, how are you feeling? Have we changed our opinion that this team needs to get rid of him? Is he performing better? And just kind of the general reaction to the fact that we've gone from a club that's really about playing the homegrowns to having 3 veteran South American midfielders filling out the center of the midfield team these days.
Yeah, actually, I have a pretty strong take on that. If I was looking back at the Sporting game and the Kansas City game, that's the same team, Sporting and Kansas City, and the Colorado game, trying to see what the differences were. And one of the very most obvious ones is that Tessman started over Acosta in both of those games. And then Acosta comes back and you get 3 out of 4 games without goals. Now, the one, of course, difference there is that Acosta did sit out the Atlanta game, but the Atlanta game had all kinds of mentality issues where the team kind of basically sat back and assumed they were going to walk over and didn't. But effectively, Acosta's been in for 3 of the last 4 when your offense has gone to garbage 3 of the last 4. So while I look at his individual numbers, I look at his individual play, and I think, well, a couple of those are pretty decent performances, but the team stunk. So you're not going to be able to convince me that Acosta is actually helping this team win when your 2 highest scoring games of the year were the 2 games he missed after he got suspended, and Tessman started both. So,
yeah, and just to kind of dig into the weeds a little bit, of the last 4 games, they have only scored 2 goals. But don't forget, one of those goals was a penalty kick in the 53rd minute of the Columbus game, and the first goal was a Michael Barrios header who was left wide open on a terribly broken defensive coverage issue for a super easy goal, and that's it over the course of the last 4 games.
Yeah.
And what I can't quite cotton here is where the breakdown is coming. I mean, Ricarte came out, had a couple of really, really solid first few performances, but he really seems to be struggling in trying to create more opportunities that turn into real danger.
I think, maybe Dan might disagree with me, but in terms of Ricarte, I think the front 3 are too static. I think there's not enough extra gaps or chaos being created because those guys are basically all in their channels and playing in their channels. And the teams that defend Dallas with these mid to low blocks, when they're really patient, they just sit there. They just wait, and nothing puts them under any pressure or stretches them at all or opens any gaps. And it's impossible for maybe Messi could do something with that by dribbling through everybody, but Ricardo's not a dribbler. So, he's just not getting the opportunities to find people, I don't think, in the final third. That's how I read it.
I think you're dead on there. Think back to like the 2015, 2016 teams, you had, Castillo constantly cutting inside from the left, Barrios or Andres Escobar from the right, Mauro Diaz when he was, not hurt or sad or whatever, was, constantly popping up around the edge of the area and Blaza's dropping back. Everyone's kind of interchanging. There's so much movement that they're dragging defenders out of position. That which, especially in a game like yesterday, when you're dealing with a low block and such a compressed defense, that's how you make space. Just going in those three columns it doesn't help. And sometimes the point of switching the wingers is to change the habits and draw inside, but instead it's just really Barrios fancies the right today, tomorrow he fancies the left. It's whatever the defensive frailties on. There's no real. It loses its dynamic almost. Looking at yesterday's game, they had what I wrote it down. It is. FC Dallas had 46 touches inside the Houston box. And Hara had something like 8 of those. It's...
Yeah, that's what I mean about not getting the ball to him in the right positions.
Yeah, there was a lot of passing around the edge of the box, and then no one's really trying a shot, or they're just recycling the ball out wide again, or further back, and then someone's just trying a shot from the distance. It was a team devoid of ideas, and potentially a striker struggling to find space and play, and teammates struggling to use their imagination to find him in any space.
Yeah, it's funny when you go back and you think about the game against Oscar and Orlando City, and then the Columbus game, and then the Houston game, and clearly the Houston result is woefully embarrassing. I mean, that's I don't know any other way to say it, but I also find a different but equal frustration with the Columbus game. And I know that they were missing one key player the entire game, but they lost Solarian at halftime. They had the lead twice, and one of the kind of things that is popping up here and there with this team is the off switch gets hit every once in a while. I think I'm saying this correctly. Both of the goals against Columbus were just poor turnovers in their half of the field. Obviously, the turnover last night against Houston that allowed them to score, and they probably should have scored prior to that on another turnover. The team just mentally looks fatigued in many ways, and that's probably not. You really can't blame them for that, and you see that a lot across a lot of these MLS teams with this crazy schedule they're playing.
Yeah, this is one of the things that Luchi's going to really have to work at. And you saw the Houston game, you saw how horrible Santos was, and had to lift him at halftime. And you remember that leading into the Orlando game, Luchi twice had, in back-to-back games, had rotated a lot of his squad in order to try and keep guys fresh. And that probably contributed to the high-scoring games against Colorado and Sporting because of the fact that they rotated guys in and out of those games, and had other guys start and gave the lineup a freshness and gave some guys with some legs chances. It's definitely a case where the overload of schedule is going to beat down all these teams, and it's going to create a high level of mistakes. And the teams that can stay the freshest and make the least amount of mistakes are going to end up at the top end of the standings, because with so many limited number of games, you're not going to get your full schedule. The standings are going to be tighter. I mean, you look at the Western Conference, and it's like 4 points between 10 teams. So it's going to be a crapshoot if you can manage your roster well enough.
Yeah, and Buzz, you mentioned this earlier in terms of kind of static play up front, and that was clearly on display in the Houston game last night, as Houston just kind of packed the box and Dallas really struggled to create anything positive in the boxes as they kind of got stalled on the buildup. But in particular with Barrios and Fafa Pico, I think we kind of have talked about the Barrios issue. Lost a step, kind of frustrating. He's kind of a streaky player. But if you look at the other side, in Fafa Pico, who's a player I'm vaguely familiar with his time in Philadelphia, I'm not sure that I have a real sense as to what his skill set is. He looks pretty fast. He looks like he wants to take on defenders, but I'm not sure I've seen him actually consistently beat defenders on the ball, on the dribble into the box.
Yeah, it depends on, we've talked about this a little bit before, it depends on how fast the outside back is, and if he's got enough of an overload help to create a little tension in that back, then he really can tear a guy apart. It depends a lot on the level of competition. I actually have some thoughts about with regard to that against Houston, because one of the ways you overload a blow block is by having extra players come into the zone and playing a little rondo, as Luchi calls them, little ticky-tacky, little quick passes to break those formations. In particular, one of the reasons why I was mad that Barrios switched sides is because he and Brian are developing a relationship with that. I'd like to see Hollingshead make more runs in there, and that would open some gaps for Fafa Pico as well, I think.
Why aren't we seeing more secondary runs out of the midfield players, the center midfield players? You've got three of them in there. We don't ever see somebody trying to get in behind the defense on delayed runs. It all feels very static and not very well, I hate to say this, but it just doesn't feel very well coached in terms of what they're supposed to do in that situation, because I think the entire league knows the team's not very good at breaking that down.
Yeah, some of that is just the nature of players. Acosta is not really that kind of player. And Ricarte seems like, we talked about this when we saw the original tape on Ricarte, that he was more of a late guy coming in and likes to sort of play underneath rather than penetrate. I mean, of the people that play in that sort of area of the field, I can think of Roberts being more of a little bit of a follower into the behind the striker. Although he's not going to play for Luchi anytime soon, I doubt. And really, Brandon Cervania is the other guy that's really good about getting forward. You remember last year, Dan, the end of the season, he had that really high X goal added because he was jumping out way above the team because he is such good in that.
No, absolutely. Like you say, it's a little bit of a struggle, and it goes back to exactly what you said earlier of young guys who just aren't necessarily getting the minutes, so then you can't, in some ways, counting them that late in games.
But Dan, I'm thinking as you're watching that game and making notes, what are the missing elements of what this team needs to be doing to score goals? Like what is the obvious tactical or performance issues for you?
I mean, the thing that stuck out to me, and it was really specific to that game. The whole 28 shots, only 8 on target, was just how many were coming from outside the box. Just that, you mentioned quick passes to break apart the shape to pull out the defenders. Instead, it was recycle it to whoever was in midfield, and then someone takes a shot from distance, and all your build-ups for nothing. Yeah, it's just incredibly frustrating. Very wasteful with corners as well.
15 corners, and I don't think I'm exaggerating to say, out of the 15 corners, I don't think a single one of them directly resulted in a clear chance on goal.
No, I was looking at Ricarte. Ricarte had 10 on his own. Only 2 of them actually made it to a player. One of them was a short corner, and the other one, Ryan Hollingshead tried a shot that ended up near the corner flag.
That's actually one of my questions I have for Luchi tomorrow, is why it changed from Reto. And it wasn't just the second half. It's like the whole game, Ricarte was taking corners. I looked, and Ziegler had like 1, I think, he took during the game. So I don't know why that happened, because Ziegler's really good at corners. So it's
I wasn't sure if they were trying to maybe use Ziegler's height a little more and put him on the other end of him, but it's... Since Ricarte's come into the team, you've suddenly got 2 left-footed guys who are adept corner takers who are also on the higher end of the payroll. It's been interesting to see what's happening, whether it's been they've just alternated or it's almost like that penalty situation.
Yeah, there's definitely some growing pains with accommodating high-priced star players into a team mid-season. with both Ricarte and Hara. I mean, they're not necessarily negative. There definitely are some pains to that. And I actually have some thoughts related to this midfield problem. If this is a good time, Peter, to talk about related to outside
I think it's a
backs,
great time. Yeah,
right. Because the Columbus game, where Dallas had a little more offense and did score some goals, right? I said that was one of Ryan Hollingshead's best games of the year, maybe even his best game, right? And let's think back to the Colorado and the Sporting games again, when Brian Reynolds was fresh into the lineup and he was going gangbusters up the wing combining with Barrios and overlapping and going crazy. And then the Orlando game happened, and they talked to him about being smart and sitting back and playing defense because of Nani, right? Mm-hmm. And since then, Brian has been a little more conservative and a little more defensive in the 3 games since then, and the offense has basically collapsed. So we've talked about this many times with this system. The outside backs have to overlap and have to overload in order to create the 5-man midfield, in order to create the extra player getting into the final third that makes the defenses have to react when there's an extra player, when there's an overload. So I think that they're asking, I don't know whether Ryan's being asked to do this or not. He just hasn't been as great this season. But they're definitely lately, they've been asking Brian to be more defensive, and I think it's hurting this team. I think you got to have those guys going like gangbusters up the wings, and maybe Ryan on the other side is because it's Fafa, then it's Santi, then it's Fafa. Maybe that's part of it, but I think a lot of the disconnect is coming from that very problem.
Yeah, the other thing that just consistently bothers me, and I'm just going to chalk this up to Luchi ball because it's the only way I can describe it, because it certainly wasn't necessary. Well, it at times was an issue with Pereira's teams, but this was an issue last year and continues to just drive me nuts this year, is how slow the team is in terms of going forward. They just don't seem to have any real initiative. They seem far more interested in retaining possession and passing the ball laterally back and forth and kind of picking and choosing their opportunities. But even when they give up a shot and Morrow starts the counter or starts an opportunity, there very rarely does there seem to be a lot of interest in vertical and doing what this team does have a little bit of an advantage of in terms of Pico and Barrios is a little bit of speed, and I just don't see them do that enough, and I don't understand why this team plays that way consistently.
There's been a couple of games this year where Ziegler and Hedges both have mentioned what they refer to as not playing quick enough when they come out of the back, and I think that's what they mean. I think that they mean that once they break the press, because you know how it is when teams play Dallas, they high press for a moment, and then once you break the press, then they drop into a mid to low block.
Sure.
So I think that's what Hedges and Ziegler are talking about, is that once you break that initial press, there needs to be some alacrity by Dallas in getting forward. Luchi with his old rondos, right? Ping, 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 getting forward and taking advantage of some of that verticality and quicker getting into the offensive third before the opposition can set up in that double line of 4 block again. I think that's what they're talking about when they say that, what they mean by we've got to play quicker once we go forward.
Yeah, but that's the part that I don't get, and it's not exclusive to any one player. It's almost like a team mentality. If they break the press and either Reynolds or Hollingshead gets the ball, more times than not, one of those two guys is going to step on the ball because they get kind of blocked. They can't go forward. They choose not to play behind the defense. They choose to stop and play backwards and start over again. The ball goes from them into the middle of the field. Santos, Tessman, Ricarte, Acosta. Man, the play from that particular part of the field is just so lethargic and not... It just doesn't seem to have any real verve to it, especially when you compare to some other teams. And again, it that almost feels like a tactic and a strategy and a direction versus the qualities of the individual players.
Yeah, my assumption is that it's basically the coached the coached value of the ball, like the whole we don't want to lose it and have you be in an attacking position and score quickly. Like I think that mentality to value it so much that you don't want to risk losing it is what's causing that. So that's actually a characteristic that I put at the feet of Luchi, because it is a mind frame that you need to switch as a player. With something we talk about in modern football all the time, transitional quickness, how quickly you can recognize that we don't have the ball and now we're going the other way and vice versa. And it's the same thing as once you break that press, you need to be able to turn your brain and go, let's go. That's the thing Oscar's team's really thrived on, and this team seems to not have it. So I'm guessing it's a coaching thing that Luchi's putting overemphasis on valuing the ball.
I find it kind of interesting. We've seen the past couple of preseasons, they've had this. They've been trying this one long ball. If they can't recycle out the back, it was either Acosta drops between the centre backs or Reto does it. But it'll come back from the fullback who can't make the run out, and then Reto will ping it left footed to the right, or Acosta will go right footed to the left wing. And and the premise is, if we can't get through you, we're going to run through you. And twice this season, they've used that to score. And it's kind of weird when you think that, the whole counter-attack in FC Dallas thing was, this is the physical trait of FC Dallas that most teams can't deal with. So do it again and again and again and again. With that one play, they seem to shy away from it. It's like, well, we'll do it once and then, let it sit for 5 games and it can be the secret weapon. Great, the secret weapon is that Fafa Pico and Michael Barrios are pretty quick guys. It's weird because, we know that's a tactical concept that they've worked on, and Luchi's talked about it for 2 preseasons in a row, how important that tactical concept is going to be, and then we don't see it very often.
Yeah, I was just looking. Dallas is actually tied for the second least number of goals scored in the Western Conference at 21, tied with Real Salt Lake, which is in 10th place, and the Galaxy, who are in last place, and only 3 more than the team with the least amount of goals, which is Vancouver, which have 18 goals and sit in 11th. And there are teams in the East that have scored a lot less goals. They've also given up less than Dallas has as well, and it just continues to be a weird problem considering I do believe ultimately a lot of this is just a byproduct of the fact that the team has essentially tried to glue the majority of its spine into this new season on a limited number of games with Santos, who again just got here. If at the beginning of the season is trying to work his way into the league. He had never played anywhere other than Brazil. You've now got Ricarte in the middle of the field who just got here, and Hara up top who just got here.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely a legitimate concern. You felt good about your center back combo, and you could even include Fafa Pico into that equation too, since none of us like Santi as a new piece as well. So really 2 of your front 3 other than Barrios are new. And then you have the guys that are contributing in midfield, Tessman, who's new as well. So, you're basically, Luchi's trying to cobble together a team here in a season of chaos and insanity that is the COVID situation and games being canceled and the team being kicked out of tournaments. And it certainly can't be easy, and probably it should be no surprise that it is happening. And really, maybe we should all be relatively happy that the team is at least in the middle of the pack. And as you say, Peter, all these new pieces, it comes back to the part that was the same, right? Maurer we knew about, the center backs we knew about, Hollingshead we knew about, Brian Reynolds, those of us that have watched practice knew about him, and Cannon before him we knew about, Johnny Nelson we knew about subbing in. Those guys have all been together for 3 or 4 seasons, whether it be in training or on a field, and all the new pieces are on the offensive end. So it should be no surprise that the offensive end is where the struggle is.
So the other, let's talk a little bit about Thiago Santos, who, at his age, man, he really has, there's been so many things about his game that we've all really enjoyed. His work ethic, his willingness to carry the ball seemed to be something he was wanting to do early in the season and has backed off on. But man, when Santos comes into a game and he's not fully fit or 100% in terms of recovery, he can be quite a liability.
To put it mildly, that was quite a flame out. So, did anyone actually see get a good view of the giveaway on the goal? When I watched the replay this morning, they only had like a cutaway from a replay.
No, and in fact, what I didn't even realize it was Santos that had turned the ball over, and I'm assuming, I don't know what Mark and Steve saw because they're obviously not at the game. They're having to watch the same footage that we are, so somehow they figured out it was Santos that turned the ball over. But I will point out that there was a sequence when Quintero hit the crossbar. In the moments prior to that, it was a very similar situation where Santos was caught trying to catch him from behind. And he just didn't look to have any energy, and he really looked out of position in those situations. And I don't know how the turnover happened.
Yeah, he's. I think it's absolutely no question that he's struggling with the calendar, with the amount of games. When he got a little bit of a rest, he looked really good. But then when it's back to back, all of a sudden it's like complete flame out. And it's not just it's both mistakes in positioning and it's mistakes in touch. Like he gets lackadaisical with his touch and he makes a couple bad passes, and even just the mobility is more limited. And part of it too comes from him being on an island lately. Like there are no more double six happening. It's now a single six more often, and that requires him to go more sideline to sideline, and he really just can't do it at his age. It's just we're looking at a team that is gotten old fast. Ricarte is at 28.
And it's so weird for you to say that. You do realize how silly that sounds.
Well, I know, but Reynolds is the only kid that plays. Everybody else is like 29, 30, 31, 32. I mean, even Barrios is 29, right? Acosta's 26, 27, whatever he is, like something right around that range. So, he's prime of his career, but not necessarily the most humongously dynamic player out there. But everybody else is. Ricarte's 29 now, so it's like, you're looking at a team that all of a sudden is full of 30-year-olds. And when you plan a schedule like this, you're going to fall apart. If you try and play every game like that, you're going to have to aggressively rotate this team and have a lot of these kids play a lot of minutes, or else you're going to lose 10 games going down the rest of the stretch.
It's kind of funny. It's almost like 2017 when Pereira brought in a bunch of 30-plus guys to play CCL, knowing that the schedule was going to be insane. Going from guys who were far under their peak to over their peak now. And except, this year it all came before COVID with just MLS and potentially US Open Cup. It really goes back to the article you wrote, Buzz, about, are they throwing in the play your kids movement mid-season?
Yeah, they definitely, I think for right now, at least on this season, have basically thrown in play your kids. I mean, none of them are playing except for Reynolds anymore. I mean, of course, Jesus still plays, but
okay. But I want to ask you a question because somebody asked me this, and somebody sent me a message, or I don't know. Somebody asked me this question after the game last night, and I thought it was kind of a silly question when it first asked, and then I started thinking about it, and I wondered. And the question is this: is Luchi making these lineup decisions on his own accord, or does anybody feel like he's under pressure from Dan Hunt and or Clark Hunt or whoever to play the big money foreign signings, the guys that are making the $600, $700, $1 million salaries?
I don't know that Dan Hunt is the kind of person that would have said flat out, you're going to play the guy I signed. He's not quite that arrogant in my dealings with him. But I do think that Luchi 100% knows that this guy got paid $1 million and his owner signed him and knows that he has to play him, because when he got here, he went right into the lineup despite the fact that Cobra was outplaying him in every way possible. Mm-hmm. I don't think there's any question that there's an immense amount of pressure to play that guy. And, to a certain point, he did a pretty good job for a couple of games there. There was a nice stretch, but like everybody else that's in their mid-30s, he probably needs games off too.
Oh, boy, he looked like he needed a nap in the worst possible way last night.
I mean, that whole team did, but maybe some of that's Houston. I mean, Reto did pretty good. He didn't look like he was tired, but then he got subbed out partway through the game. So,
What was the other note I was thinking about the Houston game? So just, here's the deal. We've all watched enough soccer to understand that that's a really terrible situation to be in sometimes as a team where you're down 1-0 and then the other team loses a man and just decides to pack it in. I mean, that's one of the hardest things to overcome in many ways in the league, especially when you're very good at breaking that down in the first part. But my question to both of you, and I want honest answers, when they went into halftime, down 1-0, up a man, did either one of you think they were going to come back and either tie or win that game?
Dan, you want to go first?
It's tough for me because I was getting score updates on my phone yesterday, and then when I watched the game this morning, obviously I knew, but
based on what you saw, that's right, because you watched it. You didn't watch it till this morning, but based on what you had just witnessed in the 45 minutes prior to that, did you think they were going to come back and win it, or tie it, or get anything out of it?
My honest thought was, Houston had that nice high press, and Dallas looked like going down to 10. If Houston didn't drastically change it, and Dallas looked like they were capable of breaking it. Obviously, they went to the low block, and the rest is history.
I'll tell you my answer. 100% no, I did not think they would win. And it was because over the first 20 minutes, they had multiple chances to score and didn't. And I knew in that moment they were in trouble. And I even talked about this. I even tweeted something about it. And then I talked about it in my instant reaction after the game, because when Houston countered and scored with limited amounts of the ball, I thought, well, I know how this game's going. And then when that guy got that red card, we went into halftime, I thought to myself, Dallas sucks at breaking down a low block. Houston's going to bunker 4-4-1. No, Dallas is not going to score. They're going to lose this game. Now, should you win that game? 100% for sure. Out of 100 times, you should win that game up for 45 minutes up a man. But I knew for a fact that, well, it's not a fact. I knew 100% in my convictions that they weren't going to.
What do you think Luchi can do to fix the issue of this team's problems breaking down a low block?
Boy, that's tough. Like I said, I think there's two ways that you can break a low block. One is to do what they did, which is just to fire 1,000 balls into the box and hope your big guys can beat their
clearly
big
did not
guys.
work very well.
No, it doesn't work for Dallas because they don't have any big, great headers of the ball. The other thing you can do is to overload sections like I talked about. You have to have your outside backs or your extra midfielders come into a zone and then outnumber somebody, which can make the defenders have to then shift. Like the center back has to come out to take the extra player. So then you have a gap. And the last way is that you just have to have a player capable of beating one or two players on their own and scoring. Now, the guy that came closest to doing that last night was Michael Barrios. But one of the things I wrote about my breakdown was he switched to the other side because he wanted to be able to make a couple of cuts and have the ball on his right foot so he could shoot his better foot. Well, the problem with that is the defenders are going to know that, and they're going to try and take you to the end line. And then Barrios is, of course, stuck trying to cross left-footed, which isn't his strong suit. So I actually thought it was a bad idea. I mean, I knew what he was trying to do, but it didn't work. And nobody else seemed to really relish the idea of, like, I'm going to beat two guys and score. Like, they don't have anybody without Paxton. That's what they were missing to me, was like they didn't have a guy who will, with his hair on fire, go at dudes 2 or 3 at a time. Dante Seeley does that in lower league play. He does that in the academy and stuff like that, but he's not ready to do that in MLS. So, that was part of why I just knew nothing was going to happen.
Have we all been a little bit intoxicated by the Ricardo Pepi train? We've seen him come in late in games, and I don't know if it's unfair to say that we just haven't seen a lot from him of late. I don't know when the last time he scored a goal. I don't even know when the last time he had a really good opportunity was. Is he a victim, A, of just coming into bad situations late in game, B, being played out of position, or C, we just drank too much of Buzz's Kool-Aid?
Well, his metrics remain really high. His XG and goals added and stuff like that remain really high. So he's playing right. Some of it is like right now, because of the way Hara plays as a false 9, they're more likely to go to Jesus in that spot. And so Luchi's using him more as a wing, which is obviously not his natural position. I mean, Luchi's told him he wants him to be a striker across the whole line and not a 9, but it's going to be the same as Barrios and Fafa when you go to Pepe. He's a guy that likes to play over the top, and this team doesn't play over the top. They don't break, right? So it's it's not going to play to his strengths.
Scenario almost played out last night that would have been horrifying to realize had befallen the team, but was also instantly fascinating to figure out how they were going to solve it when it appeared that Bresson had gotten a red card, and with Hedges out being injured, and you're going to have to assume is going to be out for at least a couple of weeks with a hamstring injury, and Bresson now out with his red card. What would have been the defensive lineup against Minnesota this weekend if, in fact, the red card hadn't been overturned?
Well, that's not out of the woods yet. I mean, Bresson hyperextended his knee and then he kept playing. Sometimes when you get on a plane and then sit around, that's
a great point. Yeah, so that's right.
I would not assume. Yeah.
Yeah. Before you move on to that answer, I just want to say, we all saw the replay?
Yeah.
Was convinced he had blown it out, right?
Yeah. I mean, there was a chance he could have blown it out, and it's possible he may have strained it. We don't know. He certainly hyperextended it. It certainly could have, as the adrenaline worn off, it could have started to swell. You get on a plane, it starts to swell. You ride on a bus, it starts to swell. You go home and sleep in your house, and it starts to swell. And the next day, you can't walk.
Wake up the next morning, and you're like, oh,
you're
no.
Toast. I mean, it happens. It's not unusual.
No doubt.
I mean, if you've ever done anything like that to your knee, even like a day later, sometimes all of a sudden, it's like the whole thing locks up, and you got nothing. So
let's say Bresson woke up with a balloon knee this morning. Yeah. Who are the two starting center backs, or what is the defensive lineup for the Minnesota game?
Well, my answer would be Tanner Tessman, because I've seen him play that in the academy, and I think he has all the skills to be a multi-million-dollar center back. But I'm sure we all think this, the answer will be Ryan Hollingshead.
Oh, no. Are you serious?
I mean, why wouldn't it be?
Well, and a 3-man back line, center backs or 2 center backs?
Well, that'll depend on the opponent. I would assume it's in a 4, and it'll be him and Hedges is out too. Reto's still alive. It'll be Hollingshead and Reto, or as you say, it could be a 3-man back line. Then it could be, who could it be? Well, Johnny Nelson can play center back, left center back in a 3-man back line. It's not great, but he can do it. And then you'd have Reto and Hollingshead, because Reynolds has played center back with a U.S. youth national team, so he could do it. But I wouldn't want to take him off the wing, so you would use him as a wing back, I think. And then the other side would be, I don't know if you can, because you can't bring. Here's the kicker: They finally sent Nicosi Burgess down to join North Texas, right? They're finally like, okay, let's send him. He did not have COVID. He's not on my list. He has no antibodies, so he can't come back without quarantine.
Wait, I thought you told us you could go to 7-Eleven and buy the antibodies.
Yes. Yeah,
no.
from Silent Bob. And then Callum Montgomery's with San Antonio.
I don't know a whole lot about him.
Yeah, Colin Montgomery's with San Antonio, so he can't come back without breaking protocol, without a quarantine either.
Oh, no.
So your two options are basically kaput. Wow.
I was fascinated last night in the actual Houston game as Bresson is, demonstrating against his red card. It began to realize, well, wait a second. Hedges is hurt. They've subbed out Ziegler, and Bresson was the only center defensive cover on the bench. Who's going to play in the back line for the rest of this game? If, in fact, Bresson had gotten a red card last night, and you could see that he was talking to Ryan to fill in one of those spots, but I don't know how he was going to manage it from that point out. And he got lucky. Luchi got lucky, and VAR overturned it.
Yeah, you could claim that there's a poor roster build here in the sense that you knew Nicosi Burgess probably was never going to be ready this season, and you knew you wanted to send Montgomery out for an extended run to try and get him ready. And we've been playing we've been watching FC Dallas play the whole season with basically one backup center back, and when he would check in, you'd have no backup center back. So it is a question mark in my mind.
Dan, do you think Luchi fancies Ryan too much as a potential backup center back?
I think you kind of use him like you know how youth teams always have that one guy who can play anywhere, and that's been that's been Tanner, that's been Brian, that's been not Reggie, that's been Edwin Cerrillo. That doesn't necessarily translate that well into first team football. And Ryan definitely he can play everywhere, but he can't play everywhere particularly well.
Since you mentioned his name, I will ask this question I had written down. Can somebody explain to me what exactly has happened to Mr. Cerrillo and Mr. Cervania, who have gone absolutely ghost on this team? I can't quite cotton what has happened to the progression of those two center midfielders.
Well, Cervania is easy. When Acosta was suspended or hurt and he got a chance to play, Tanner outplayed him. So that one's pretty much like a head-to-head scenario, and Tanner's been better. Edwin is still in the mode of trying to build him for the future. He's still not do you remember the piece I wrote a year ago called Bridging the Gap? It was about the young homegrown guys that have been signed, that there's a difference between guys that are on the roster for development and guys that are on the roster because they actually play. And Paxton made the leap across that gap and became a guy that played. Edwin's still a guy on the bottom end of that gap. He's still a guy that's on the team for development reasons. So basically, in my estimation, they're sending him down to North Texas because he is 20 and they're trying to push his progression with the idea that either the next season or maybe worst case the season after, he's ready to be your starting midfielder. So that's why they're sending him down and making him play with North Texas all the time. But yeah, they don't have enough confidence that he can start as the six. You remember end of last year when they were missing a six when Grezzo got sold, Acosta played six, and that's what would happen now. Like if you needed a starting six, I'll say this, but hypothetically, if you needed a starting six, it would be Acosta.
It's also if even for the more recent stuff, Cerrillo getting the red card for the headbutt for North Texas, getting suspended, and then just gave away a penalty. So his
that was a tough call,
kind of
penalty, but he definitely gave it away. But a little bit of a harsh call.
He's making some pretty poor decisions either way, though.
Are you just trying to be polite and not say what's really on your mind, Dan? I can't quite tell where you're going.
No, it was. It was a young player getting young player mindset out.
All right.
Well, that is why you're sending him down, right? You want him to play through these kinds of things. Being a six, a lot of it is about game reading and decision making. So, there's always going to be growing pains for young sixes as they become pros, and so him playing a lot with North Texas, I think, should be expected to continue because they're trying, just like Callum Montgomery, they're trying to push him to get ready to be the guy eventually. So that's where Edwin is.
And Callum Montgomery is a perfect example because last season, early in preseason and then for North Texas, we saw he was making some really dumb decisions passing. He could, he may not have the best feet, but he could make a pass, but he would then pass his fullback or Breck or their six into difficulty, and we saw the progression by the end of the season, and now going up into USL Championship. So yeah, definitely, that is totally a valid point with Edwin that you want him to get rid of those teething problems in North Texas.
Yeah, I just when you think about where this team. The hype on this particular team was look at all this product that it is growing, but you really stop and look at the current situation, it raises a lot of questions. You think of Jesus' situation, what's going on with him, the stagnant growth of Cervania and Cerrillo, clearly the injury issues with Pomacol. They got rid of Reggie. They sold him off. That was kind of the plan all along, right? Pepe is very young, and there's you see where I'm going with this, which is the really kind of lead story about FC Dallas is all of this product it's growing and how it's turning into it's turning into good positive results on the field, and it certainly doesn't feel that way currently, and hasn't for a while.
Well, that's weird. I just heard you say the name Brian Reynolds like 8 times, so I don't really know.
No,
But
okay.
no.
I didn't throw Brian. No, you're right. No, Brian is obviously a good one to go in there, and we've had lots of conversations about. But I'm speaking specifically about these important positions, attacking positions, the ones that are
Yeah.
scoring the goals and really grab all the headlines. I mean, you're right, and I apologize for leaving Brian out of that. I didn't do that on purpose, but I am thinking specifically about all of these grand conversations about a midfield run by academy products, and we're now 2 and 3 years absent, beyond those original conversations, and we're not seeing it.
Yeah. Well, the serious answer that I was going to give you was that young players need a lot of time to progress. They need to be brought along slowly. The player that can walk in and play is extraordinarily rare. And I'll explain that by saying, Paxton, we love. We're really excited about him. Jesus, last year we were. Brian, we really love what he's doing right now. All three of those guys have been a pro for 4 years now, right?
Mm-hmm.
So Edwin is in his second year. Thomas is in his second year. Tanner's in his first year. Brandon's in his third year. So, those guys, you want to see them moving in over to see them become a big playing effective MLS player all at this point is too early. It's like these kids all get super fired up that they think they're going to walk in and play a ton. That's actually really, really rare and really, really hard to do.
Yeah.
It should be at least 2, if not 3 seasons of being a pro in training and going down to North Texas before you're going to expect to see anything out of a kid, in my opinion. So that's the answer to those questions. And the fact that we've seen Edwin start some games and seen Thomas start some games is actually really, really exciting for their future. You want to see them continue to get slop minutes like Dante Seeley's getting, right, for over the rest of this season, with the idea that at some point, maybe next year when they're in their third year, or maybe even fourth year, depending on the guy, is when you're going to start to see them start. 15-year-old kids don't start in MLS. 17, 18-year-old kids don't start in MLS. Brian Reynolds is 19 and just now getting to play. So it's going to be 2021 really for the normal person, and if not at least 19 before you're going to see them get much action. It's just too early for these kids.
But Buzz, as somebody who has watched all of these guys very closely for several years, and you know them like the back of your hand,
Yeah.
Do you continue to feel confident that Cerrillo, Cervania, Pomacall, Ferreira, those guys are going to turn out to be productive players for FC Dallas in the near future? Obviously not this season, but in 2021.
I do. Paxton is just a health question. That's, I can't answer a health question. Like, I have no idea if Paxton's ever going to be 100% healthy again. I mean, I really don't. Mm-hmm. Edwin Cerrillo, I would say, as Dan mentioned, is just a little bit of deer in the headlights right now. And I think the more he plays with North Texas and the more he gets spot minutes, the better it'll get. And I actually think that middle of next year, probably, you'll start to see him get ready to start. Who else are we talking about? Jesus, I'm worried about, but I think it's just mental. I think it's just confidence in himself. His coach has confidence in him, clearly. I think right now, guys have been brought in that play where he plays, and now he's not a starter. They're kind of moving him around. I think he's just sort of lost the plot, if you will. But I think if you give him time, he's too good of a player. He needs to, I'm not going to say toughen up, but maybe just find something in himself mentally to be like, dig deep and just persevere. And this is true. We've talked about this before with any of these kids, right? They've been the best player in their team their whole life without even trying. And they finally have gotten to this pro contract, and they expected it to continue to be like that, and it's not. You're now at a level where everybody can ball and everybody can play, and you have to dig into your guts and find it and figure out how to make it happen for yourself. And I'll use Thomas Roberts as a great example of this, right? We talked a couple of podcasts ago about the extra work he's doing now outside of the team, right? He went to work with a trainer to work on his strength, and he's clearly stronger. He's clearly shouldering off defenders that are hitting him better. When you watch him with North Texas, he's clearly fitter because he was working on some little nagging little things. He's building some strength in that areas, and he's taken it upon himself to, I'm going to get better. He's working with Chewy, who was one of the FC Dallas coaches, on individual technique too. So he's decided that he's going to make himself better. That's what these kids all have to do. They have to reach down and find it. They all have the talent, and you hope you see enough in them that they're going to do it. And of the kids that are signed at this point, I'm a believer that all of them are going to make it to at least be an MLS player. There's no more of these homegrowns right now being signed that don't have it, that are just kind of like, and I'm going to be rough here to some people that like, let's use, and I don't mean to be mean, let's use Moises Hernandez as an example. Moises Hernandez was not nearly the player that these guys are now. He was always just going to be a fringe player and a role player in MLS at best, and couldn't really take coaching. These new guys are at a higher level, in my opinion, and all of them have what it takes, I think, so far to make it. Even Justin Che, the progression in the last 2 months with him is phenomenal. I'm real excited about his future. It's going to be 3 years before you see him in MLS for more than 5 minutes probably, but I think they all have what it takes now. The guys that are borderline now don't get signed anymore.
So, Dan, if you're a sad FCD fan, and I don't mean that guy in particular that we know and love on Twitter,
Sad fans.
but sad fans, but the just the general concept of being an unhappy fan, we lost a derby game against a very underwhelming Dynamo team. What would you say are the likelihoods that Dallas is a team that can put something together and kind of repair this and go on a legit playoff run, or maybe more simply, they're going to qualify for the playoffs, right, Dan?
They're bloody better.
Well, they're only 2 points ahead of Houston, and 3 ahead of Salt Lake at this point, who are the two teams sitting out of the playoffs.
True. I mean, they're only 2 points out of fourth as well. So
that's right.
Yeah, it's a very bizarre.
And they have a game in hand too.
That is very true. Trying to think what the run-in's like.
They've got a super easy schedule.
Yeah, that's kind of the problem.
Yeah, they play down, right?
Yeah. You probably see them play pretty well against Minnesota, and then when maybe Inter Miami will rise like a salmon through the table with the fat Higuain.
That goal was sweet, though, dude.
That was a sweet goal.
It was. It didn't have a patch on Arturo's, but
Right.
It's. I don't know how much of it. I mean, we can't use the young team excuse. I mean, and the second year head coach, but this team just is. It's not the same team one week to the next. It was kind of funny listening to. I asked Brian Reynolds recently about being the only team on some of these teams now. When you go from 1 week playing with 5 or 6 homegrowns to the next with a bunch of 30-year-olds. And he said, very diplomatically, he said, there's a real change of pace. And that really does dictate the game, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we just have to watch and see what happens.
Yeah, but if you look at the rest of the schedule, they play Minnesota. The rest of the schedule is front and backed with Minnesota. All right? And then they've got Kansas City, who is ahead of them in the standings, but they've had some good results against lately. Then they have to go to Nashville twice. They have to go to Salt Lake once. Inter Miami comes here, and they have Houston one more time here. So it goes Miami, Kansas. It goes Miami here, Kansas City here, at Nashville, at Salt Lake, Miami here, Houston here, at Nashville, and ends. And this is the important part. The season ends at Nashville, which is the new game they rescheduled today, November the 4th, and then at Minnesota to end the season before in the playoffs.
Yeah, we said before that we liked the idea that you had 2 against Houston, 2 against Nashville, 2 against Minnesota, all teams that you've done or should be able, either done well against or should do well against. Enters wasn't any good. Real wasn't any good. Sporting was the only good team you played, and them you had good results against. It's like you couldn't ask for a better schedule, and now I'm worried about it.
In theory,
Right.
In theory,
right.
yeah.
Because if
they
you
play
go
down
back,
to the level.
yeah, because if you think about the last 4 games, those are all 4 games you could look at on paper and go, Dallas should win these games. You've got 2 good teams in town that are on the road and missing players, and you're playing 2 pretty crappy teams that are on losing streaks or winless streaks, and you lost to both of those teams. So, when we were kind of giggling about how easy the schedule is last pod or the pod before, on the heels of now 4 games of essentially 1 goal in the run of play in 4 games, this seemed a little more daunting because several of these teams are just going to sit back and pack the box, by the way, too, because that's pretty much the tactic against the team.
Yeah, you better take care of your business at home. You got 4 at home and 4 away. You better win your 4 home games, or you're not going to have much luck getting in, I don't think. That's going to be the key, home form.
Yeah, and even I'd asked Luchi about it last week. How much the home advantage had strengthened or regressed in COVID. I'd asked him because, we were talking about Columbus being top of the East and being on a great run, but they still haven't won an away game since the restart.
And they've been playing a pretty sketchy schedule too. That's the other That's the other dark secret about Columbus's run is they hadn't been playing a bunch of really top-notch teams.
Yeah, and they were managing to knock out like a 1-1 draw every week up until they got 3 put past them by Toronto. And it was kind of weird because he said, well, in some ways it's harder physically with the same day travel, but mentally and emotionally it's kind of easier and you're not necessarily facing a tough crowd. But, we all know that players often say it's harder to play in Frisco because of the lack of a crowd compared to somewhere like Seattle. It's interesting because it seems like every player and coach has a different take on how tough away games should be right now in this current situation. And FC Dallas absolutely do need to do the work at home, but this should really be the year to start doing some away too.
Yeah, when you look at the standings, 4th through 12th are all within 1 win of each other, basically.
Right.
4, 5, and 6 wins, 4th through 12th in the West. So it's going to be right down to the wire crapshoot about who's in, who's out. Although the weird oddity of the whole standings, of course, is Vancouver has 0 ties. I don't even know how you do that. They're 5-11 and 0. How's that even possible? I don't even.
Yeah, that is a weird situation.
The thing we often see is we've seen a few times, at least under Oscar's tenure, was Dallas failing to turn ties into wins. And I mean, this year it may well be avoiding. Well, yeah, it may well be as much avoiding defeat and converting those to wins.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, we all
It's a
know where
tie
this
set.
is. We know where this is all headed, right? We all know that it's. I mean, and it's already the script has been written, and you can already see it playing out. It's going to be Seattle and Toronto again in the MLS Cup. I mean, just based on the long-standing set of results over a period of time, it's pretty clear to me they're the 2 best teams in the league at this moment.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm canceling my ESPN subscription now.
Although Orlando's only got 2 losses, I love what Oscar's doing down there.
Sure.
I mean,
yeah.
that dude can coach. God dang.
Yeah, that's my greatest nightmare, Buzz. Please stop it.
I know. He's going to win a cup. You know it.
It's going to just drive me
I
bonkers.
know. It's going to be so good.
Yeah.
Can you just do it with
So
a good
salty.
team and not Orlando?
Wait, don't you like? You mean from in terms of a roster, you just don't like their culture and their branding and Orlando and period?
Well, I mean, it'd be pretty embarrassing for Dallas if he takes a team that's never been in the playoffs before and wins MLS Cup with them.
Yeah.
That also, yes, you're absolutely right. That would be the greatest facepalm result out of the whole Oscar decides to divorce FC Dallas story. You're absolutely right.
I'm trying not to think about it
I
too
was
much.
going to make a joke about. I was going to make a joke about finding Luchi a sports psychologist, but now I think I just need a psychiatrist.
Yeah.
I do have a question about Luchi.
Okay, far away.
Why was he dressed like a Cuban nightclub owner last night?
You don't like the vest? I liked it.
You did like the vest.
Yeah, I've decided I'm going to call him Coach Gucci.
It just didn't appear to be appropriate sideline apparel.
Well, he's not going to wear a suit. He's not that kind of vibe, He's a hipster, so it's going to be sweaters and turtlenecks and vests.
Are vests back in?
Oh yeah, I think so. Yeah, a lot of hipsters wear vests with their beards.
No, I mean, at some point, are we all going to ask ourselves if he's spending too much time thinking about what he's going to wear on the sideline and not enough on how to break down a low block?
How to break down a low block? I don't know. No, I don't think he. I think his wardrobe is probably the same. He just grabs those on top of the pile. It's just all hipster.
He's a fashion-forward guy. He's definitely not a hipster.
Well, no, he's not a hipster, but he's like Miami hipster. It's like it's not quite like full on South Beach. It's like South Beach was like a chill vibe kind of hipstery style to me. That's how I read it. I mean, I don't know. I'm 50. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I'm with you, Buzz. I don't
man,
get it.
yells at cloud.
Look, I'm not a fashionista by any stretch of the imagination. I thought the big comfortable knitted sweater was kind of a cool look, and I was curious as to the vest thing last night. I just thought that was a really odd choice for sideline apparel. All right, well then, getting back to stuff that really matters and not for busting balls. Anything else that we want to discuss that's not on the run sheet that I have either missed or didn't get added to it?
Other than North Texas, no, that's it.
Oh, North Texas. What is going on with the old FC Juniors?
Well, they had a really nice win this week. Edwin Cirillo was down, which was great. Nikosi Burgess has gone down for a couple of games, which is great. He looks terrific, which is as we expected. They're basically, 5 points down off of behind the Richmond Kickers, who are the current second place team, and the top two teams get to play for the championship. They got 4 games left, and this game coming up this weekend is against Richmond. So this is the proverbial 6-point game against a team that you're trying to catch directly for that spot. So this is your season right here. If you win this game, you'll be down to 2 points out with 3 games to play. If you lose it, you're basically done. So this is a must-win, season-deciding game this weekend against Richmond for North Texas SC.
It's the game that the entire league's going to be watching. One of the things I keep identifying is that Richmond in second place has a game in hand over everyone, and they really need to, all of the chasing pack needs them to start dropping a couple of results. And they've got a few gimmies coming up with Orlando City B, Tormentor FC. So North Texas SC is kind of the last great hope for most of USL League One.
Richmond Kickers, by the way, coached by former Dallas Burn great Darren Sawatsky, if you guys remember him.
Oh, the guy with the long blonde hair.
Yeah, he was a part-time model when he was playing soccer, so he doesn't have the hair anymore.
He part-time what?
Model. He was a part-time male model. Fashion, clothes, magazines, that kind of stuff.
Wait, he was a part-time Breck Shea?
Yeah, basically. Back in the day.
Damn, you beat me to it.
Yeah.
I mentioned Fat Higuain earlier. Did you see when he ran to Breck Shea? That blonde hair is long and flowing.
It is. He is a handsome fella, that Breck Shea. Hey, am I right in saying that Miami signed him to a USL 1 or championship contract and he's playing up to MLS?
That sounds right. I think, yeah.
Okay. I thought I remembered that, and I was thinking about that when I saw him in the highlight of that. I thought, man, is he still on a USL contract? That's
they did it with him and Mr. Alex Morgan.
Ah, right, Mr. Alex Morgan.
Yeah, it's going to be harder to go to Manchester.
Well, if you say Savando Carrasco, who the hell even knows?
Nobody knows who that dude is. Okay, now this has been a pretty downer, bummerific podcast. I do want to take a minute to highlight, which I think is so cool and really the culmination of what all of us really hope for when we think of this club and its potential is turning on ESPN or Fox or whatever it is and seeing Weston McKennie playing for Juventus, starting in that lineup with Ronaldo, and Chris Richards starting for Bayern Munich. That to me is so kick-ass and cool.
Yeah, I did a thing for my Patreons this week that I called Academy Working as Intended. And yeah, that's the thing, right? Because Western McKinney is the bellwether moment for this club and probably this league, right? That's what you didn't want to have happen. Chris Richards is what you do want to have happen. This is the very, very best players that you're going to churn out. And for FC Dallas, it's a guy every, 3 years between those two guys? That's about right. Those guys that are superstar, top 5 league in the world caliber are gone. You're never going to get them to play for your club. What you want to do is sign them and make them money. So Richards working as intended, right? Then you're locking up the next tier guys, your guys that need a few years in MLS, and then they become European worthy, your Paxtons, your Cannons, your Brian Reynolds. The academy is working exactly like you want it to work. It's doing exactly what the Hunts intended. It's doing what any team in MLS wouldn't be joyous to have happen.
Yes, and I know there's going to be a small percentage of people listening to the pod that are going to react to my bringing this up like, yeah, but neither one of those guys actually ever played for FC Dallas at the senior level. And you're right, it is still cool to say that kid right there on Juventus, on Bayern Munich, came through our system. And and anybody listening to the pod, I understand where you're coming from, you should at least have a grain of pride and excitement over that.
Oh, no question. It's one club. It's one organization. You should take pride in the fact that they came out of this organization, that the team, and however method they did, they found them, they helped train them, and they signed them. They're going to get solidarity for Weston McKennie from Juve. That's fantastic. There's a recognition there that that's happening. They should get the same thing if Richards is ever sold by Bayern. Like I said, the very best dudes you're never going to keep. And that's true for almost any club in the world. Look at those clubs from Portugal or from Belgium that sell kids, an 18-year-old for $15, $20 million, that never see them in their first team. It happens all the time. Alphonso Davies probably only played for Vancouver because they're garbage. If they'd have been any good, he wouldn't have played there and just gone for $20 million right out of the academy too. So this is how it's supposed to work. This is the way it works. Have pride and get excited that you get to watch a local kids play at the biggest league in the world, man. That's amazing.
Dallas kind of has that nice take on saying that those two players come back. They'll, in the off season they come back to visit family and friends and former teammates and everything. Not a lot of clubs experience that. With a lot of them, it's they're there, then they're gone, and you never see them again.
Yeah, I twice saw Weston McKinney come by FC Dallas training in the last year and a half pre-COVID when he came back. He posted pictures of himself 4 months ago at Toyota Stadium on his Instagram. Chris Richards came back and watched the Open Cup game at SMU last year. These guys still feel a love for the club. They're going to have a connection to the club, and I think it's awesome.
Would it be would we all just go absolutely pass out from just utter shock if Weston was to score a goal and lift his shirt up and he had an FC Dallas crest on his shirt underneath it? Would that not be?
That'd be cool.
That's super weird, but
pretty awesome.
We can dream that way, right?
It won't happen, but it's pretty awesome.
He rips off his jersey and he's got an FC Dallas tattoo.
Yeah, even better.
Oh, speaking of which, do you reckon Cobra regrets getting his FC Dallas tattoo?
Did he get one?
He got one. Wow.
Yeah.
Where did he get it?
He got the bull in the shape of Texas.
Wow.
Oh.
Well, he had a good year. I mean, he's probably real excited.
I do.
Although
I do have to admit, I kind of missed the Cobra.
I will say, Houston was the first game where I was like, damn, this team actually does miss Cobra.
Yeah. Cobra and Paxton. Yeah.
Another question before we go that dawned on me this week. One of the big global soccer headlines was one of the goofiest ones, which was Arsenal's Arsenal's firing of Gunnersaurus, their mascot. And then Mesut Ozil then offered to pay the dude's salary, and that's been a pretty funny story. And it got me thinking, because when I did go to the one game, the Colorado game, and Buzz and I sat there, I thought, you know what? Damn it, I didn't see Tex Hooper. Did Tex Hooper get furloughed?
I don't know the answer to that question, but I imagine he can't be on the field because of COVID-related reasons.
but I didn't see him running around the concourse or standing over in the beer garden waving the flag or anything.
So I'm gonna share my experiences from supporter group stuff when the supporters group said, hey, the FC Dallas drumline, can they not be in front of the supporters groups? Can they maybe engage, I don't know, other people in the stadium? And they said, well, if they're not front and center on camera, we're not paying them. So that's probably the same happened.
Oh. Is there any... Who's the top wage earner for Dallas? Is it Ricarte?
No, it's,
it is Ricarte. I'm sorry, not Ricarte. It's Hara. Yeah. Any chance Franco Hara offers to pay Tex Hooper's salary?
I doubt he even knows who Tex Hooper is.
He probably doesn't know who Tex Hooper is.
Well, since we love the social media guy, Eddie, right now. He tweeted out a picture of the Arsenal dude in an FC Dallas jersey. I was like, you're going to ditch Tex Hooper that quick?
Yeah. I'd get my picture taken with Gunnar Sorensen in an FC Dallas shirt. Hell yeah. I'd do that. All right.
You'd be amazed what those guys get paid in the big leagues, like the NBA. Oh, Lord.
Now, when I lived in Jacksonville, because of the radio show, we knew the dude that was Jackson DeVille, who was the guy that ran around in the Jacksonville Jaguar uniform. And he had his own van that was all wrapped in, Jaguar colors. And that cat literally made so much money doing appearances at birthday parties and business openings. Oh, it was insane how much money that dude made just running around in an outfit, sweating his ass off in Florida humidity. Man, that thing stunk to high heaven too.
Yeah, I would bet you that most of like NBA level mascots, most of those guys would probably be like the second or third highest paid player on this team.
I don't know if he was making that much money, but he was definitely a six-figure dude as an NFL mascot, no doubt about it.
Well, some of the best ones
figures in Swamp-Ass.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, well, R.I.P. Tex Hooper. We loved you when we knew you. I'm assuming there'll be a resurrection of Tex Hooper when fans are allowed to come back full time or people are allowed on the field, right? Yeah,
I would think so. Wouldn't you?
They haven't completely just butchered him or anything, did they?
I mean, if Hoops can come back, then Tex Hooper can come back.
All right. I think we've beaten this one to death. Sorry, everybody, that our team isn't playing very well at the moment. Surely they'll turn things around and give us all hope for a good old-fashioned MLS Cup run, only to crush our hopes and break our dreams at the very end, right? Because that's what we've been used to for 25 years.
Yeah. Well, it's single elimination playoffs, so they'll probably make it to the semifinal.
Oh, that's right. That's right. They're only playing one leg. Yeah, I totally forgot about that.
Have to go to Orlando and lose on the road.
Oh, man, you're a jerk, Buzz.
I know. I'm a buzzkill.
You are.
See what I did there.
All right, Dan Crooke, your internet has been super choppy tonight, but, man, you have been funny. Just wanted to tell you that.
You're funny.
Okay, that's a disappointing comeback.
You're a disappointing comeback.
That was better.
That was better. That's super better. Buzz, we still love and adore you, even if you can't go to practice.
Yeah. I still love and adore me because I can't go to practice either, but at least I can actually go to stay in town this weekend now that my game's been canceled.
All right, everybody. Well, if you choose to brave the COVID, Minnesota is in town. It's a Sunday night game it's starting at 7:30, and it is again on Fox Sports Southwest and all the other options they've built in for you. Thank you, FC Dallas Curious fan. We appreciate you, and we'll speak to you next week on another edition of Third Degree, the podcast.
It's been disappointing.